Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We had stopped after having taken basic principles of buying and selling, and we said one of the most important conditions is rida. Rida meaning both parties have to accept and be happy with the transaction. So a person cannot be forced to sell that which they don't want to sell. Thereafter, we said that after a transaction occurs, there's something called khiyar. Okay? Ya, alif, and ra. Khiyar. The word khiyar literally comes from the word to have a choice. Okay? So here we're saying that the buyer and the seller, or at times the buyer or the seller, in that transaction, during the transaction, or after the transaction, has an option. They have a choice to go back on it. Okay? That's the concept of khiyar. And we spoke about it. We had started off with the different types of khiyar. We had taken khiyarul majlis. Majlis is the gathering. So we said that if a deal happens with buyer and seller in a gathering, they're in the same place, and as long as they haven't parted ways, either the buyer or the seller, even after they've agreed on the deal, if either one of them want to go back on it, it's allowed. Why? Because they're still in that gathering or khiyarul majlis. And I give you an example of that. Let's say I'm selling this book here to you. And after I sell it to you, and we are still in the same place, okay? And then you think that, you know what, I've got ripped off. It's a bad deal. Even though the transaction's already happened, we're still in the same gathering. You say, I want to go back on this transaction. It's permissible for you. Or if I sell the book and then I remember that, you know what, I need it for an exam coming up in a month. So I'm canceling the transaction. As long as we're in the same gathering, that's allowed. That was khiyarul majlis. Okay. Then we took khiyarul shart. Shart literally means condition. So here, the transaction happens. Okay, let's say you're selling a car. Transaction occurs. However, the buyer can specify or the seller can specify a period of a few days. Some say up to 3 days, where during this period, if they want to go back on the transaction, they can do. Okay, so if you look at it, the first khiyarul majlis, was to do with the gathering itself. After that, you've got khiyarul shart, is literally if somebody wants to extend this khiyarul majlis up to 3 days, but you've got to stipulate it and it's got to be agreed upon. So you say that, for example, I want to buy your car, but give me 2 days or 1 day or 3 days. And during these 3 days, if I want to call off the transaction, I can. Here it's permissible. That's khiyarul shart. Today, inshallah, we'll be taking khiyarul ru'yah. Ru'yah from the word ra'a is to see. Okay? So the idea behind this khiyar is, number one, is it permissible to buy something that you haven't seen? Okay? So let's say I'm going to sell you a pair of shoes. You haven't seen it, but I've roughly described it to you. And you say, you know what, no problem. I've bought the pair of shoes, meaning I'm in the transaction. Here the deal is done. You've given your word. But you can stipulate to say that on condition, I have what's called khiyarul ru'yah, or the choice of seeing it. So when I see it, if I'm happy, the transaction will stand. The deal will still be done. If I'm not happy with it, I have the choice and the option to go back on the deal. And this is permissible. Give you an example. Somebody's selling you a car, and let's say they are far away. They're going to bring the car, and they tell you, or you know them, let's say a good friend living in a different city an hour away. Says, I'm selling my car. You say, okay, here's the description of it. Okay. 50,000. Okay. He says, you know what, I'm in need of the money. Just transfer it to me and I'm gonna deliver the car next week. And you transfer the money, but you stipulate to say, you know what, the deal is done, but on condition that I have khiyar ru'ya, where if the deal will only be done, or let me word that differently. I remain with an option to go back on the deal when I see the car, because it might not be as you described it to be. So let's say he comes with the car after a week and you're happy with it, you keep it. You've already given him the money. But if you're not happy with it and you say, you know what, I'm not happy with the car, I've seen it now, as long as you stipulate it, you can go back on the deal and this person has to refund you the money that they gave. So that's khiyarul ru'ya. What you'll notice between all these khiyars is a lot of it is practiced upon in the first world, however, in different ways or different methods. For example, if somebody tells you you can buy from us and you can return within 7 days with no questions asked, that's like khiyaru shart, where they've given you a period. They've given you an option to say, you know what, use the product, see the product, be with the product, 7 days. If you're not happy with it, return, no questions asked. Is khiyar or ruya compulsory for all business? No, this is not compulsory. This is not compulsory. Khiyar al-majlis, khiyar al-shart, and khiyar al-ru'ya. However, what it is, or these are guidelines to help facilitate a transaction and to avoid any conflict that may arise. Sometimes you want to buy something from somebody. You don't know them. You don't know if they're upright. You don't know how good their product is. So you want to protect your interests and your rights. So that is khiyarul ru'ya in short. Then they mention a few rulings regarding khiyarul ru'ya. They say that if a person wants to exercise their right, they need to inform the seller. Okay, so you can't say, for example, that after a person's seen it and used it and everything, then they want to return it a few months later after they've already seen it. No, your khiyar ru'ya finishes the minute you've seen it. If you've seen the product and you didn't say anything or you didn't express your dissatisfaction with it, you no longer have that khiyar. Also, the Hanafi books, they mention that the seller does not have khiyarul ru'ya. Logically, because he's the one selling the product and he knows, but they give an example. They say, let's say somebody inherited a car or a piece of some material wealth, and they know it's theirs. They've inherited it. However, they didn't see it. So it's possible, especially in those days without technology, you might have inherited something and not seen it. And you hear that somebody's given you an offer. So you say, okay, sell it. Whoever's there, you tell them, sell it. So here, this person, they can't go back on the deal. Meaning, if you then had to go a year later and you had to see that, oh, this guy bought my piece of land that I inherited, but it's so nice. I'm only seeing it now. I want to go back on the deal. We'll say here, you as a seller do not have khiyar al-ru'yah. Then they mention what happens if you've got a product, okay? You've got a product. We could divide them into two. Either this product, when you look at it from the outside, it already gives you a gauge of what's on the inside, okay? So let's say a roll of material, and we're basing the example on people being honest. If they open the roll and you see the first part of the fabric and you want to buy 15 meters of it, you know that, okay, this first part is how it is. So you don't have to open all of it. So your khiyar ru'ya is done. Let's say you said, I want to have what's called khiyar ru'ya. It's done after you've seen the first part of it. Why? Because the apparent shows you, or the outside gives you an indication of what's on the inside. So all that's rolled up on the inside. However, there's certain things that you would never know unless you open them. So here, you would have that khiyar until it's open. Person might say that what happens if the seller has got a product? He can't open all his products because let's say he opens the product. Let's say it's a boxed toy, for example. And this boxed toy, a person comes and says, you know what, I want to see it. Or he's bought it, for example. And he says, once he opens it, he says, no, I'm not happy with it. Is he allowed to return it? Yes, he's allowed to return it if he stipulated khiyar ru'ya. So somebody might say, oh, you're forcing the seller to open all his boxes of toys. Because what happens if this person sees it and then doesn't buy it? Then he sees it and doesn't buy it. So here we'll tell the seller, have one sample or one tester when it comes to perfume. That's why when you go to all these shops that sell perfume, they have a tester out. So you can test it. So that's upon the seller to provide that. Why? So it saves them opening all the new boxes, because once you've broken the seal of a box or you've unwrapped something or unpacked, the value goes down. It's no longer considered new. So that's your what they call ayina, or your sample. After that, they give you a few different rulings with regards to this khiyar. They speak about khiyar al-ru'ya for a blind person. They say that here because they can't see, you would need to describe the product to them. And if they carry out any action that is similar to them having seen or close to them having seen, then it's as though they've seen it. So, for example, let's say it's a product and you describe it and the guy knows how to feel it, etc. And you say, you know, just like this, like this, like this, then that no longer stands for them. And when it comes to a blind person buying and selling, it's permissible for them to buy and sell their own products and to buy and sell on behalf of somebody else. Why do they mention this? Because some people might think that, oh, the person can't see, so there's no khiyar or ru'ya, so that would mean that they're not allowed to buy and sell. Here we'll say no, they're allowed to buy and sell for themselves as well as on behalf of somebody else. A question you guys probably all have from this is, okay, let's say a person didn't use khiyar in the gathering, didn't use the option, and they didn't use their choice for 3 days, then they didn't use their choice, so everything was okay when they saw the product. What happens if they start using it and they find a defect in it? Here, this is still coming. It's called khiyarul aib. Still going to come. Inshallah, in Friday's lesson, we'll have what's called bay'ul fuduli before they move on to khiyarul aib. Bay'ul fuduli is where somebody sells a product belonging to somebody else without their consent or without their permission. Inshallah.